Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to Utility Sports. And we've got another NBA trade guide video here. This one focused on the Chicago Bulls. And right now, there's a lot of drama swirling around Chicago's franchise. Arturas Karnisovas, of course, built a team that a lot of people thought, hey, this team's going to have a lot of talent. They've got a lot of playmaking. They've got a good bevy of guards that can do a lot of different things. When you look at the Lonzo Ball, Alex Caruso, DeMar DeRozan, Zach LaVine pairing, those are four completely unique guards from each other. And it was really exciting to see them last year when everything was clicking, when they were completely healthy. But since then, things have fallen apart and they don't look like the same team anymore. And there's some concern about Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan, their relationship. I do have some insight to that as well, with some insider information actually that we're going to get into later in this video. So let's jump into it here. If you guys are new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. If you're not new, you know what to do. Smash that like button. And now let's get into the video here. With the video preview, we're going to talk about this Bulls team, where they currently sit, their record and their seeding. The day I'm recording this is December 22nd at night. They did not have a game today, so it will be uploaded on December 23rd. So it's, everything is up to date as of the morning of December 23rd. They will have tradable players and contract situations that we're going to talk about. Who could we see potentially getting traded? Who's on the table, and what would deals like that look like, which we'll talk about later on in the video. It's important to touch on their draft pick situation. Chicago's in a really tricky spot right now. Of course, they've made some intriguing moves and some interesting moves that not everyone agreed with in the last year and a half. And I think some of that's going to come back to bite them here. So let's talk about the draft pick situation and how it's going to really impact the future of Chicago basketball. Then we'll look at their long-term cap space. Is there any plausibility to this team adding anyone in free agency if they do make some trades? And what is really the front office looking at from that perspective if they were to make a move? We're going to look at if they're going to be a buyer or a seller. At this point, everything is kind of pointing toward the seller category, but that is the one flaw with recording here. In December, is we're 1 3 or 4 game win streak away from the Bulls maybe pivoting to becoming a light buyer, or maybe they just don't have any movement at all. And then their projected activity level, which I think is one of the most important things to talk about, because if you're a fan of other teams, it'll give you a good idea of how available some of these Bulls players are. But also, if you're a fan of the Bulls, it gives you a little bit of insight on maybe what to expect. This trade deadline, I'll be live on the channel the entire duration of that week again. So just like I was last year. So I'm really excited for that. Make sure you guys are subscribed so you don't miss out on any of that future content as well. And let's get into it here with their current standings. They're 11th in the Eastern Conference, and they're actually closer to being 13th than they are to 9th. So it's not been great basketball in Chicago. They're 13 and 18 as of December 23rd, like I said, the morning of. And Chicago, they've just been kind of circling around the bottom for the last 3 weeks or so. This team has just struggled to win a game. And I think a big reason why is some of that drama between Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan, which we're going to talk about here in a second. But as you can see in the current standings, they're outside of the play-in race. Now, it's not a guarantee that they would miss the play-in at this point. They could definitely, win some games and get back into it. But it doesn't look pretty right now in Chicago, I think, is the biggest MO from this graphic here. So let's get into some of those tradable players. And DeMar DeRozan, Zach LaVine, those are the two guys that I need to touch on first here. I have very good insight onto the relationship between these two players. I actually know someone very close to Zach LaVine. And I know that there is a little bit of drama between Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan, specifically in terms of Zach LaVine wanting to be the guy. The fact that DeMar DeRozan came in, was an instant All-NBA level player, kind of stole the show from Zach LaVine. And LaVine, for the most part, feels like it's his franchise there in Chicago. But I think everyone acknowledges that DeMar DeRozan's actually been the better player in their shared time there. He's been the guy who's been clutch for them at the end of games. You think back to last year, a few of those game winners. Now, I know this year the Bulls have not been as good in the clutch. They've actually really struggled. I think there's been a lot of signs of that, obviously, in the clutch. Now, their most recent win, would point in a different direction. But for the most part, this year, they haven't been good in the clutch. And I think Zach LaVine feels a little distaste towards DeMar DeRozan. LaVine wants to be the guy in the franchise. DeRozan has been the guy for the franchise the last year and a half. And I think there's a lot of controversy around that, both internally and outside of the organization as well, when it comes to media platforms and just the general fan base, with the idea that, hey, LaVine's got this big contract, DeRozan's the free agent edition. who's really the man. And, honestly, DeMar's been the guy, but I think LaVine, I think that eats at him, honestly, just from my insider information, the source that I have very close to LaVine. I talked with him a ton, and I know that LaVine does not like being the number 2 guy in Chicago. So I think that's part of why the drama is the way that it is. So we look at DeMar. He's got 2 years, $57 million roughly on his contract at this point. And this offseason, he becomes extension eligible, which gives Chicago some tough questions to answer. Do they keep DeMar DeRozan around? What is the long-term outlook of his play style? Is he going to be good 3, 4, 5 years from now? My guess is he probably will, because he's one of the best shot creators in the NBA, and he doesn't really need a ton of separation to be successful. He's very good in the contested mid-range area. And I think DeRozan's somebody who we've seen his athleticism kind of diminish a little bit over the last few years. I think people don't realize how athletic DeRozan was back in his early days in Toronto as someone who was a slam dunk contest participant and, could absolutely fly. He's really transitioned his game into a below the rim contact finisher who's an elite sniper in the mid-range area and can knock down a couple open threes when he really, really has to. DeRozan's really shifted his game, and I think he's a player that you want to bet on long-term. I really do believe that. But it is a tough question for them because they're not winning games right now. So when you already have Zach LaVine locked down in that massive 5-year, $215 million deal with a player option in the final year, do you want to commit to LaVine DeRozan, especially when there's already some turmoil between the two of them seemingly? It gives me a tough answer to maybe the fact that the Bulls will not keep DeMar DeRozan, even though he's been the better player between the two of them. And LaVine, with that 5-year, $215 million deal, he's had a bevy of injuries in his career. You look at the knee injury that he suffered way back when in Minnesota as well. He actually played on that ACL tear for about 5 minutes in that game. I think that's one of the more underrated elements of LaVine. He's a really tough dude. He's somebody who he wants to get better. He works extremely hard in the summer. He's a really good player. He's very, very good, and I think he'd help a lot of different teams. But that contract, I'm going to keep it a buck with you, isn't that good. That final year, I believe, is going to be approaching around $50 million annually. Now, I know with a new CBA, new TV deal, there's going to be some more money out in the cap space realm of things that LaVine, it's going to be a little bit more affordable than it currently looks right now. But in my most recent trade guide video, I talked about how Bradley Beal's contract is really scary to me. I would be kind of lying if I didn't say the same thing about Zach LaVine here, given his injury history, the amount of money he's owed, the fact that he's never won a playoff series. Not that that's his fault, but at $40 million a year, it makes it really tough to add other good players around him. I think Karnisovas did as good of a job as you really can do, and it ultimately hasn't paid off because, one, Nikola Vucevic was a massive flop. I think if you want to point to one thing that was a big mistake by Arturas Karnisovas in his time with Chicago in his tenure there, trading for Vucevic is the one that is brutal. Wendell Carter, you could argue, is just as good of a player as Nikola Vucevic right now. You could argue that Franz Wagner is a more valuable player in terms of trade discussions right now than Nikola Vucevic. I think if the Bulls were to be offered Franz Wagner straight up for Vucevic, they would say yes in a heartbeat. And they still owe a pick in that trade as well. So, and then Vucevic is a free agent this offseason. So it's very possible that with no extension already done, he could leave them this offseason. He was in some trade rumors for Rudy Gobert this offseason. Of course, nothing materialized there after Minnesota swooped in. But Vucevic, it's been a nightmare. And I was on the right side of history with this one. I just did not like Vucevic at all in this trade. I thought that Chicago needed something a little bit different than Vucevic. This was before they had DeRozan and Lonzo and Caruso. So I kind of looked at it as the bare bones. Oh, they have LaVine, Vuce, Patrick Williams. Okay, I don't really know if I like that. Of course, they added some players, and you could argue, well, the fact that they were able to add players to Vucevic, maybe that's why getting him was important, so that they became a destination just based off of name recognition of Vucevic, but it hasn't worked out on the court, clearly. Lonzo Ball, a player who I thought it was a phenomenal move by them to acquire, and just talk about bad luck, this kid can't stay healthy. Lonzo Ball is a phenomenal player, and funny enough, he's the player that they would need to win games right now. They need a little bit more organization into their offense. They need an elite catch-and-shoot guy, which Lonzo Ball is. He has been the last 2 or 3 years of his career now. They need Lonzo Ball. And the fact that he can't run without pain, he's struggling to walk upstairs after some of his injuries is a major red flag to me. I think that they should consider trading him if they get anything of value back. It's tough to cut your losses here, Alonso. I think he's a good player, but if you can get anything back that is at least halfway decent, I think it's better for this team long term. Alex Caruso, non-guaranteed final year of his contract, 3 years, $29.5 million, one of the better contracts in the NBA. He sneakily has stopped shooting the ball. He has a lot of 3-4 shot performances, which is a little puzzling to me because he's not a terrible offensive player. He's operating like he's a guard PJ Tucker right now. I don't think that's how he should play. I think he should be a little bit more aggressive. I think it balances out their offense when you have a connecting piece like him offensively who knows how to attack gaps, attack closeouts, and he's a pretty decent playmaker, honestly, for how much the ball is going to be in his hands. He's got like the adequate amount of juice in terms of playmaking capability. So I think that contract's really good. I would be shocked if they trade Caruso. I think he's one of those players that a lot of teams would love to have, though. There would be a lot of value out for him on the market. So maybe it's a reset button for them. Patrick Williams, he's right now averaging a little bit under 10 points a game. I'm not going to sell my stock on him yet. I think he's still a good young player. He's got restricted free agency after his rookie contract's up. He's a player I just don't think you should cut ties with. It's an example of you trade off a player too soon and he ends up popping off somewhere else. I just don't think you should sell stock on Patrick Williams, especially since his stock isn't, first of all, super high right now. And secondly, I just think on that contract, it's pretty team friendly still at this point. You have, years of control yet. There's no reason to move off of him. Coby White, though, is a player I'd be willing to attach in pretty much any deal right now. He has his moments. He's not a brutal guard. I think, honestly, one of the best fits for Coby White would be in Phoenix, playing with his former Tar Heel teammate, Cam Johnson. But funny enough, Coby White kind of joked about Cam Johnson getting drafted in the lottery. Cam Johnson's a better NBA player right now. Coby White's just not that good, honestly, and I didn't like the draft pick when they took him, and I think that's been vindicated based on how he's played during his rookie contract here. There's not a lot of memorable Coby White moments in Chicago that are super positive, honestly, and Bulls fans are going to say I'm being a little harsh here, and I am. The issue is, if they're healthy, this team might be actually pretty good. Now, the one issue I have, too, Billy Donovan's doing whatever he does with the rotations. Andre Drummond's 11th on the team in minutes. He's also 3rd on the team in total rebounds, only behind Vucevic and DeMar DeRozan. And, those two guys lead the team in minutes. So it's kind of funny to me that they're one of the worst rebounding teams in the NBA. I believe they give up the second most second chance points per game. They have one of the worst rebounding rates. I think they're like 26th in defensive rebounding. And they have a guy there who, yes, he's not a complete player. He's not a perfect player by any means, but he's a guy who's going to grab 8 to 12 rebounds a game when he plays 20 plus minutes, and you just aren't playing him. It's kind of mind boggling to me. So I think Andre Drummond needs to be on the floor more. It would be way better than Derrick Jones Jr. at small ball 5, but to each their own, I guess, with Billy Donovan. So let's look at their draft pick situation. Like I alluded to earlier and referenced, they still owe the Magic their 2023 first round pick, which is top 4 protected. They do, however, own Portland's 2023 first, which comes from the Lauri Markkanen trade, who's playing really well in Utah right now. Obviously, they traded him to Cleveland, kind of opened the door for the Donovan Mitchell trade later. And they got Portland's pick there by basically sending Larry Nance to Portland, who later got flipped to New Orleans. That trade has essentially landed itself in multiple other moves that have really impacted the NBA, which is funny. And then I think one concern here, too, they actually owe their 2025 first to San Antonio, which is top 10 protected. Then in 2026, 2027, it becomes top 8 protected, which then ultimately conveys to only a second round pick if it never conveys. So, because of those protections, they basically can't trade a first. They can't trade their 2023 first. They don't have it. They can't trade their 2024 first because of Stepien. They can't trade 2025, 26, or 27 because of protections. And then they also cannot trade 2028 because of the Stepien rule based on those protections in 2027. So they have 2 picks they can trade. They can trade that Portland one in 2023, which is lottery protected. The value on that's just not that great, honestly, with how Portland's been playing, and the protections on it just don't make it much more intriguing to teams. And then you also look at the fact that their other pick is a 2029 first. So does Karnisovas want to roll a pick out that far away? No, and it all comes back to the Wendell Carter trade. I think that right now, if you could just tell them, hey, you have Franz Wagner, Wendell Carter, and your own first this year instead of Vucevic, I think everyone in the front office would say, yeah, that was a bad trade for us. Please give us those things back. And unfortunately, they can't go back and change history with that. So definitely a tough situation for them. When we look at long-term cap space, well, they're projected negative $24 million in usable cap space this offseason, but trading DeMar and LaVine, which I think is very unlikely, by the way, it would give Chicago about $44 million in usable cap space, which is enough for a max slot plus a little bit more on top. And then if they were to additionally move off of Vucevic, it would open another $22-ish million. Of course, they could either do so by renouncing his rights in a cap hold decision, or they could also at some point trade him this year too. So I think he's really the player to watch. Vucevic, I think, is the most important player for Chicago in terms of the trade deadline this year, but a surprise move of DeMar and or LaVine would really shake things up in the NBA. So are they a buyer or a seller? I think there's a sale going on here. I think Chicago is going to be forced into being a hesitant seller. You know, Karnišovas, they chose a direction here literally less than 18 months ago. They decided, we're going to try and be a good team. We're going to trade for Vucevic. We're going to go sign DeMar DeRozan via sign and trade with Thaddeus Young. And we're going to go out and make some moves. And we're going to bring in Caruso. We're going to be really aggressive. We're going to make a sign and trade for Lonzo Ball. And they've been aggressive. They made a lot of moves that you would think would help this team win. And honestly, in a normal year, this team might be good enough to make the playoffs, honestly. But the NBA right now is so deep that it's hard to see them making the postseason this year, especially in that really tough Eastern Conference, which I think is not going to become any easier anytime soon with you. When you look at the teams out east, there's a lot of good young teams. So Chicago finds themselves on the outside looking in, and the East is really reshaped around them, which is pretty terrifying for them. So they're going to have to look for some teams to trade with. I think one example here is my Dallas Mavericks, which a couple of these I like, a couple of these I don't. If they go out to get DeMar DeRozan, I like it. I think DeMar DeRozan would fit perfectly with Luka Doncic. He was actually, when he was in free agency, I clamored on this very YouTube channel for the Mavericks to sign DeMar DeRozan. I wanted him so bad. He was my top target for the Mavericks. He was the guy that I thought he can solve all the issues around Luka and Kristaps Porzingis by just giving them another offensive, focal point, a guy who could be the connector piece where when one of them's on the floor, you can have DeRozan with them and everything would be better. The team would win more. And they needed another shot creator who could also facilitate. And DeMar DeRozan's awesome at both of those things. I think he's the perfect addition for Dallas here. I think they're missing that element, and I think DeRozan would give it to him. LaVine, I think, would be an option as well for Dallas. I know a lot of Mavericks, social media pages in terms of, some of the people who tweet about the team, not actually from the team itself, not affiliated with the team in any way. They want LaVine. I think that LaVine, had he been healthy, had his contract not been nearly $50 million the final year, I think he would be awesome for Dallas. But it's not a perfect world, right? These are not perfect situations. It's not a perfect circumstance. I think LaVine to Dallas would be a mistake. And don't even get me started on Vucevic. If the Dallas Mavericks trade for Nikola Vucevic, so help me God, it's another lost year and Nico Harrison should lose his job. Vucevic to Dallas would ruin everything. He's a terrible fit with Luka Doncic. He would be a terrible fit to what this team really needs, which is somebody who can actually block a shot around the rim. They really struggle in terms of size, rebounding. Yes, Vucevic is a pretty good defensive rebounder in his own right, but there's a lot of empty calories there with Vuce, in my opinion. In terms of some of the numbers you look at, he's not as good of a shooter as everyone talks about him being. I think he would be a mistake for Dallas. Just outright, can't do it. Do not trade for Vucevic. If you signed him in free agency at a decent price, okay, whatever, that's fine. Do not give up anything in terms of trade value for Nikola Vucevic. I just don't think that works for Dallas in any way. Toronto here, a fun reunion for DeMar DeRozan, I think would be something I'd like to see. I think this is one of the least likely on the list here. DeRozan to Toronto probably does not happen, but it's kind of funny here. Toronto right now at this spot, they're struggling a little bit too. Could a DeRozan reunion kind of jolt some things back into place for them? I think so. I think that they need someone in the half court who is a certified bucket getter. Fred VanVleet has his moments. Pascal Siakam has his moments as well. Of course, a 52-point bomb the other night, which was incredible. Extremely efficient as well, by the way. But someone off the bounce like DeRozan would give them something they've been missing, honestly, since Kawhi departed. And I think that's been the one issue with Toronto. Their half-court offense just isn't good enough. DeMar DeRozan solves that issue. And I think he would also take a lot of pressure off of Scottie Barnes, which I think would be good for his own personal development. The Lakers here, DeRozan or LaVine would both be fits. Again, some people are going to try and throw Vucevic there to the Lakers. Don't do it, Lakers. Vucevic does not solve any of their issues. In fact, he probably enhances some of them. So they should not do that by any stretch of the imagination. But DeRozan, he'd be a fantastic fit there in Los Angeles. And I'm actually on the side of saying that they should not trade Russell Westbrook, just given the fact that they could go into this offseason with cap space. The only way that I think trading Russell Westbrook makes sense is if you are landing DeMar DeRozan, because he still gives you some of the playmaking that you'd be losing with Russ going out the door. But he is a better fit onto this team. He's a better scorer in the half court, which is what the Lakers really badly need. He'd be awesome. LaVine, it would be a dream come true for Zach because he's an LA guy. Famously swore under his breath when the Minnesota Timberwolves drafted him way back when, and he clearly wasn't a fan of being up north. So I think a nice warm climate like LA, he could fit right in there. Zach LaVine would like being back in the same city he played college basketball as a UCLA Bruin. The Spurs here, I think, are an intriguing option and one that people aren't going to talk about with the Bulls because both of these teams are, you would think, sellers, right? This is where it can make some sense for Chicago to kind of make a reshape move where you trade Vooch and maybe that Portland pick, which in my opinion is not that valuable, and you try and get Jakob Poeltl here. And people are going to say, oh, does Jakob Poeltl solve the issues? Not all of them, but I think he's a significant improvement long-term. He's significantly younger than Vucevic. I think he's a very, very nice pick and roll player. And not only offensively, but defensively, he's one of the best drop coverage bigs in the NBA. Now, if you trade for him, you're going to be pretty limited to drop coverage. You don't have a lot of optionality defensively. And if I was coaching in the NBA, I would want more of a versatile guy, someone like Jalen Duren, who for Detroit, I think is going to become one of the most versatile defensive big men in the league, honestly. Someone who's going to be of the Bam Adebayo cloth. But Poeltl's so big and lengthy, but I think he's a really underrated big, and I think he would make Chicago actually significantly better by helping them protect the rim a little bit more, kind of get more of that defense first mentality, which I think's been the big drop off from last year to this year. They're just not getting stops as much as they usually were last season, and it changes your point differential from a positive to a minus, and that's why you lose way more games than you were last year. Defense is important. The loss of Lonzo Ball's really showcased that, but Jakob Poeltl, I think, would kind of right some of those wrongs there. And then my final team to talk about here, the Los Angeles Clippers. They have a tradable first-round pick. They've got a bunch of mid-level contracts that I think would be intriguing to Chicago, actually. If you look at the Luke Kennards of the world, the Marcus Morrises of the world, the Robert Covingtons of the world, those are three players that would get significant minutes for Chicago. And if you go down the list, the Clippers have a bunch of guys that I would say are expendable for their perspective. If it were to mean getting another player like a DeMar DeRozan in the building, especially since he has another year on his contract, it's not a one-year rental. It's at least a 2-year rental with a good chance of actually being able to retain him. And you have time to work out an extension if you really want to, and you see it play out well. I think the Clippers are a team that they get massively, under talked about. They're a very aggressive team. They've made a ton of moves at the trade deadline the last 3, 4, 5 years. And I think they're going to continue to do that. You even think way back when Doc Rivers was coaching, the surprise Tobias Harris trade that really set them up to land both Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. Of course, last year they made the surprise one around Serge Ibaka. This team is just active. They also made the surprise trade around Norm Powell and Robert Covington. So they've got a lot of pieces here. I think DeRozan would be a fantastic fit with the Clippers. He's talked about wanting to play in LA. Of course, everyone assumes it's for the Lakers. It would be the most Clippers thing possible to go in and trade for the guy that the Lakers wish they had. That's just been kind of the MO the last 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 12 years, going back to Chris Paul. Everyone kind of underrates the Clippers and their ability to make stuff happen. I think DeRozan to the Clippers is actually not a pipe dream here. I think it's something that could realistically play out. And I think the Clippers would be really, really dangerous if they get him because he's durable, gives them stability, which I think they need. And he's a half-court bucket getter, which is, again, something I think they need come playoff time. So the activity level here I see for Chicago is somewhat slow. but I could see 1 to 2 trades materializing. I think the two most likely, one around DeMar DeRozan, one around Nikola Vucevic. And it's a really tough pill to swallow for the front office there. They're going to have to repivot and decide that, hey, we were wrong. And they're going to have to make a couple moves to try and get this thing right. But moving the two oldest guys there is what makes the most sense to me. I don't think Zach LaVine's going to have as good a value as everyone hopes he does. He's a very good player when he's healthy, don't get me wrong. But that contract is just pretty enormous. So I think his trade value is going to be a little bit more limited than what most people are going to say. So because of that, DeRozan, most valuable player on the team, and Vucevic, the easiest player to move because he's an expiring contract. I think those are the two trades I could see them making. Now, if they only make one, my guess is it would be Vuce, not DeMar DeRozan, but you never really know. If someone comes in with a great offer for Caruso, I wouldn't rule it out either. So there's a lot of teams that should be interested in Caruso. I know I didn't talk about him on the last graphic as much. All 29 teams that will have interest in Alex Caruso. He would fit everywhere. Every single team could use an Alex Caruso. They would all want him. He'd be awesome everywhere. So the Bulls would have their options in trading him as well. Hopefully you guys did enjoy today's video. If you did, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more. Thank you so very much for watching. It really does mean a lot to me. Again, if you hit that like button, it lets me know I'm doing a good job here at Utility Sports. Stay tuned for more NBA trade guides like this one. And we're going to have a lot more NBA trade content as well, plus some NBA draft content, which is really fun to record. And I hope you guys enjoy that content as well. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.